I'm not Nostradamus. I don't have a crystal ball. But I live in Sosua. I own property. I run a business. I see what's happening on the ground every single day. And I've been connecting the dots. This isn't just guesswork. It's my outlook on the future of Sosua based on history, economics, and the moves the government is making right now. Recently, as I'm sure you've heard, the government launched one of the biggest cleanup operations that the Dominican Republic has ever seen. Raids, arrests, street crackdowns, all designed to erase Sosua's reputation as an adult tourism hub and replace it with a brand new image. So the question is, what happens next? Does Sosua succeed and reinvent itself as a family-friendly destination? Or does it snap back to its old ways once pressure fades? Or does it risk following the path of Boca Chica, a town that has had its golden years as an international hotspot, but after setbacks, never fully regained that global international feel? Now, Boca Chica is still a lively beach town with lots of locals, but as an international draw, it fell short of expectations. Could Sosua face the same outcome? In this video, I'm going to lay out 3 possible future scenarios for Sosua and explain why only 2 of them are really on the table. By the end, I'll share exactly where I think Sosua is heading and why this moment could define its future for decades to come. In the first scenario, we're going to talk about how the government's plan works. In the first scenario, the government's plan succeeds in its mission. The nightlife that made Sosua famous fades into the background. The days of women soliciting openly at Pedro Cosante are over. Bars, lounges, clubs that thrived on that sort of traffic begin to close because their business models don't work anymore. As a result, a big part of Sosua's old tourist base, particularly Black Americans and other men who have come here for the adult scene, shifts to other destinations like Cartagena or Medellin, Colombia. But in their place, Sosua begins to attract new customers, Dominican families, North American families, and more traditional tourists who want beaches, dining, and safety without the reputation that Sosua once had. Here's where it gets interesting. Businesses that are positioned for this type of tourism begin to thrive. The new beach market, the ocean club, and the newly opened Hard Rock all benefit from a family-friendly atmosphere. The locals stay employed because the jobs don't disappear, they just shift. Instead of going to nightlife venues and informal street economies, they move into formal hospitality and retail with increased wages. The property owners win the most. With Sosua's reputation improving, it brings an increased investment from international chains who originally did not want to be associated with Sosua's nightlife image. And not only that, real estate values also rise, and owners who bought during the downturn are about to see that equity growth. And of course, the government benefits too. Why? Because the cash-only street economies that dominated Sosua for decades never showed up on the books. Now, tourism dollars move through formal business, which means more tax revenues for the state. That means better roads, sidewalks, new public parks for the kids, and more reliable electrical systems. Let's take a look at option 2. The old Sosua returns. The second scenario is that the government plans doesn't stick. Business owners are already squeezed by the downturn. They feel the pain, the lost customers. Tourism shrinks, crime risks begin creeping back up, and the economy struggles. Faced with empty bars and unpaid loans, they push back, staging protests, speaking out in town halls, and lobbying officials to ease restrictions. Over time, the government softens. The police presence becomes less visible. Curfews are relaxed, and tolerance zones are introduced. Little by little, nightlife creeps back. The women return, the foreign men return, the clubs and casinos reopen, and the money returns with them. It's not exactly the wild Sosua of 3 months ago, but it's close enough to the restore business activity. Airbnb bookings climb again, short-term rentals fill up, restaurants and bars see traffic on weeknights as well as weekends. For property owners carrying mortgages, it's a lifeline. Their units are once again paying for themselves. Option 3 is the doomsday scenario. In that scenario, everyone fears it, but in my opinion, it's the least likely. This is the Boca Chica outcome. Here's how it plays out. Both the nightlife and the family-friendly plans fail. The Hard Rock doesn't succeed because cruise ship tourists don't spend enough money. The Ocean Club is left catering to a very narrow market. International tourists lose interest, and at the same time, the nightlife doesn't come back in full force, so the old visitors don't return. What about theft? A handful of local panhandlers, motoconchos, and vendors chasing a few tourists are left to remain. Crime rises as money disappears, and Sosua slowly turns into a lazy, underwhelming beach town that relies almost entirely on Dominican weekend visitors. If you want to see a real-life example of what something like that looks like minus the crime, just look at Boca Chica as an example of a beach town that was on the rise, receiving public and private investment and international travelers. All right, so let's talk about Boca Chica for a second as a warning sign. Boca Chica was one of the Dominican Republic's first tourist beaches, a popular spot in the mid-20th century that attracted both locals and international visitors. Over time, its role has shifted because it sits right on the doorstep of Santo Domingo and naturally became the weekend beach for the city's capital residences. And that in itself is not a bad thing. After all, it's their country, and Dominicans should dominate their own beaches. Tourism should have a footprint, but not one that overwhelms local life. The trade-off, however, is economic. When a beach is primarily locals, hotels, Airbnbs, and vendors can only charge so much, and that kind of international infrastructure that fuels places like Punta Cana or Sosua doesn't fully develop here. And yes, Boca Chica has had many of the same adult nightlife issues as Sosua, though not to the same extent and not as noticeable. And lastly, that's why today Boca Chica still holds more cultural importance for Dominicans than it does as a global tourist hub. As new destinations like Sosua, Playa Dorada, and later Punta Cana grew, Boca Chica was left behind. Today, it's still a busy beach town, but mostly for locals from Santo Domingo. Prices are low, and the international branding never really returned. And despite new investments, including 10 million USD, recently announced in the boardwalk, it struggles to compete at a level of other destinations. And I want to point out that this new investment into the beach revitalization was recently made this summer, so we need to still give it time to play out and see how that turns out. So that's why Boca Chica matters to this destination. It shows what happens when a town loses international momentum and never fully gets it back. Sosua is at a crossroads. Will it reinvent itself successfully, or will it drift towards a Boca Chica-style future? Now, let's talk about why I don't believe in option number 3. Let's be clear. I don't believe Sosua will end up in the doomsday scenario. Why? Because even without international tourism, Sosua still has 3 things Boca Chica never had. Number 1 is a strong pipeline of private and public investment. Number 2, the country's largest expat community sits within the Sosua Puerto Plata corridor in Cabarete. And number 3 is a central position in the North Coast growth corridor. Even if tourism slows, Sosua beaches are too attractive for locals to ignore. Families from Santiago and the Ciabo Valley will continue to visit. That alone guarantees a base level of business. Sure, spending per customer may be lower than international tourists, but it's still steady. And what's more, the scale of government and private investment around Sosua right now is unprecedented. All right, so now let's dive into the bigger picture and investment development. So for that, we're gonna have to zoom out a little bit. So on the public side, the new highway from Santiago to Puerto Plata will cut travel times dramatically and make the North Coast more accessible to millions of Dominicans.
Subject, the Vice President of the Republic, Mrs. Raquel Peña, reported this Friday that a portion of the recently approved supplementary budget by the National Congress will be allocated to the construction of the Amber Highway, a project that has been announced several times. Karen Lucas gives us more details.
The northern region of the country will benefit from the supplementary budget. This was announced by the Vice President of the Republic, Raquel Peña, who revealed this Friday that part of those funds will be used for the construction of the long-awaited Amber Highway, which will connect Santiago and Puerto Plata in less than 30 minutes. So he indicated that the resources will be taken from 20% of the budget that the government plans for public investment
The Tiano Bay Cruise Port in Puerto Plata is already bringing record numbers of passengers, and the massive Punta Bergantin project has already signed a Westin hotel, and with more hotels scheduled to break ground in 2026. On the private side, the pipeline is just as impressive. Laguna City at Ocean Village in Sosua has begun delivering its first units. There's also Nomad in Cabarete. There's also W2Q Residences, which I have featured on this channel. And there's also The Shore at Encuentro, and there's also many more actively in pre-construction sales. The global hotel brands are planting their flags. The Ocean Club, a luxury collection resort, is already open and operating in Sosua.
Man, there's a lot going on in DR, that's all I'm saying. A lot of beautiful things going up, a lot of money happening out here. So this is Ocean Club. Beautiful property, you wouldn't even think that you're in Sosua. Like, take a look.
La Quinta by Wyndham is coming to Puerto Plata. Even budget chains like Super 8 Wyndham are entering nearby towns. So when you look at this lineup, one thing becomes clear. Serious investors are betting on the North Coast, and when big names commit, property values tend to follow. So now, where Sosua really lands. So putting this all together, where does Sosua end up? My prediction is that it falls somewhere between option 1 and option 2. The government will succeed in cleaning up some of the reputation, but nightlife won't disappear completely. It will be pushed into a more regulated form, maybe a tolerance zone, maybe stricter operating hours, but it won't vanish. That's the important part. These are two proposals that were made at actual town halls this past month in Sosua, and the government is possibly considering. Now, I want to say they haven't accepted it. I'm just saying considering as possible compromises. That balance means that two things. Families will feel more comfortable visiting Sosua, and nightlife businesses will still have economic freedom to operate profitably. Over time, that mix could actually make Sosua more stable than it was before, less extreme, but still attractive to multiple audiences. So now, let's talk about property values. This is coming from the investor's angle. Right now, rental rates are down. Property prices are soft, and yes, the raids accelerated that decline. But if you zoom out, this is part of a normal real estate cycle. Downturns don't last forever. In fact, downturns often create the best opportunities for investors who can see the bigger picture. Within 1 to 2 years, as these projects come online, infrastructure improves and Sosua settles into a new balance where values will climb again. Buy now when fear is high is how smart investors position themselves for growth. And remember, Sosua's location is unbeatable. It sits right in the middle of the action, 10 to 15 minutes from the international airport in Puerto Plata, 20 minutes from Puerto Plata itself, right next to Cabarete, and surrounded by beaches like Playa Alicia and Sosua Beach. Combine that with new infrastructure and new investment from the public and private sectors, and the long-term trend is clear. So now, we have to ask the question, could Sosua become the Vegas of the Caribbean? Yeah, I'm laughing at it a little bit. Here's something worth thinking about. If Sosua lands somewhere in the middle between option 1 and option 2, it could actually become something even bigger than the Las Vegas of the Dominican Republic, maybe even of the Caribbean. Think about it. Vegas was built with its economy on a mix of regulated nightlife, world-class entertainment, and big brand investments. It didn't try to erase its adult image. It leaned into it, how to manage it, regulate it, and monetize it for the benefit of not just tourists, also the locals in the city. Sosua could do the same. It already has 2 decent-sized casinos, a variety of hotels, and short-term stay options for travelers, and the best variety of local cuisine restaurants, in my opinion, on the whole island. If officials lean into this balance, family-friendly beaches by the day and safe and controlled nightlife by night, Sosua could evolve into a one-of-a-kind destination. It would stand apart from Punta Cana's all-inclusive beach resorts, Cabarete's surf scene, and Puerto Plata's cruise tourism. It could be the place in the Caribbean where adults know they'll find excitement, families know they'll find safety, and investors know they'll find opportunity. I'll say this directly. If any public officials are listening, and I'm sure some of you have already considered this, Sosua doesn't need to be erased. It needs to be reshaped. If the balance is handled correctly, Sosua could become the beating heart of tourism on the North Coast, the way that Vegas is for Nevada. And if managed with vision, it could even have the potential to become the Vegas of the Caribbean. So, will Sosua collapse? For anyone who's hating on Sosua, sorry to burst your bubble. It's not going to. Will it be unrecognizable? Probably not. The most likely outcome is a hybrid, a more balanced town with nightlife that still exists but doesn't dominate. It regulates, and a new family-friendly investment that broaden the economy. That's why I believe Sosua is far from finished. In fact, it's at the beginning of a brand new chapter. And if you're looking at this from an investment perspective, the current downturn might just be the best entry point to get in. As Warren Buffett says it, be fearful while others are greedy, and greedy while others are fearful. Right now, a lot of people are fearful about Sosua. But if you look at the bigger picture and everything I just showed you in this video, there's every reason to believe that it's heading towards growth. And if you need help finding the right property in Sosua or anywhere along the North Coast, I offer consultations, I offer full support, I offer connections to contractors, realtors, bank lenders, private lenders. That's what we do here at Linkzup. We're here to help. Like literally, I didn't have this when I was trying to figure out my way down here. So if you're interested, I'll leave a booking link in the description. So just remember, paradise isn't a dream, it's a decision. And the first step is yours to take. My name is Brian from Linkzup, and I thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. These videos take a lot of work, and it's never just one shot, okay? So again, I just want to appreciate your support. We've just passed the 1,000 subscriber mark, so thank you again. And hey, let me know in the comments. Do you think that Sosua is done for? Do you think we still have a future? Do you think we could possibly be the Vegas of DR or the Caribbean? All right, so without further ado, I'll see you in the next one.